The Washington Commanders aren't going to get $18.5 million by releasing Marshon Lattimore, but by making their move before March 15th, they'll still get plenty of cap relief.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And I'm David Harrison, your guy on the ground, credential member of the media, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, also writing for Commanders on SI. And I'm here with you 5 days a week. Coming up on today's episode, loopholes aren't always great, and deadlines can force some bad decisions, but the Commanders face both with Marshon Lattimore. All of that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. March 15th is my first soft deadline, whatever you want to call it, for the Washington Commanders to make a move regarding Marshon Lattimore. This conversation came up at the end of the week a little bit extensively around Commanders, water coolers, and community. So I thought we'd dive just a little bit deeper into this, because the unfortunate truth, if you want to call it that, is that the Washington Commanders are not going to get $18.5 million in salary cap relief when they release Marshon Lattimore. And it is expected by, I think, all of us that they're going to release Marshon Lattimore as some way, same way, shape, or form at some point in time in the offseason. Like I said, March 15th is kind of that hard date that I'm eyeing for the Washington Commanders to make that decision, because on March 15th, if by the end of that day, the Washington Commanders have not released Marshon Lattimore, they owe him $2 million in a roster bonus that currently lives on his contract. And I got to give a hat tip to Mitch Tischler of Monumental Sports, because he sent out a tweet that really kind of got me thinking about this. And I saw some of the conversation going on around the topic on social media and all this stuff, had some text messages from some All Access Everyday Club members. And so I thought we would dive into this, because what Mitch pointed out is something that we haven't really been talking about. Like when we talk about Marshon Lattimore being released by the Commanders, we all kind of go $18.5 million in cap off the books because he's owed. He accounts for $18.5 million on the books this year against salary cap, but he has no guaranteed money, which means there's no dead money, right? So all that money would be freed up, $18.5 million. And that would be true had Marshon Lattimore not torn his ACL. But because Marshon Lattimore is injured, the Washington Commanders cannot just release him. If they just simply release him, then what they run the risk of is Marshon Lattimore and his agent filing a grievance against the Washington Commanders, because teams are not allowed to just simply release an injured player, no matter what the circumstances are. Well, as long as the player was injured while playing football, I should put it that way, because that obviously is a circumstance. But assuming the player was injured playing the game, which Marshon Lattimore was, tore his ACL against the Seattle Seahawks, if you didn't know, they can't just simply release him. There are protections in the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, that protect players from such behavior. If the Washington Commanders were just to simply try to release Marshon Lattimore just free and clear, they would file a grievance. 40% of his current cap hit would be frozen as they went through the entire process of the grievance hearing, and et cetera, et cetera. It's just a nasty, nasty business. So what's going to happen is what Mitch was talking about, is an injury settlement. That is what is expected to come. That has to be negotiated. And basically, without getting into the full details of it, because one, I'm not an agent, I'm not a front office member. So what I know, I think I know enough to talk to you about. First thing that's first is going to happen is at the front office. So Adam Peters and Marshon Lattimore's agent are going to have to come together and say, hey, due to this injury, how many weeks of football are we expecting Marshon Lattimore to miss in the upcoming 2026 NFL season? If they can agree, let's say they say 4 weeks. Let's say they say Marshon Lattimore is going to miss 4 weeks in the 2026 NFL season. They agree to that. The Washington Commanders pay Marshon Lattimore an injury settlement equal to 4 weeks of his base salary. That amount of money, let's say it's $2.5 million. That amount of money now becomes settlement money. It turns into what you and I would essentially call dead cap. So it would impact the salary cap. So in that case, from $18.5 million, if the Washington Commanders agreed to a $2.5 million injury settlement, that would drop that number to $16.5 million freed up in salary cap. So still a great amount of money, but it's not the full $18.5 million. So why the March 15th deadline? Because March 15th, like I said, if Marshon Lattimore is still part of this roster by the end of business March 15th, the Washington Commanders owe him a $2 million roster bonus. That is not then included in the injury settlement. And I'm telling you right now, Marshon Lattimore and his agent are not going to say, well, you gave us a $2 million roster bonus already. We'll go ahead and take a lower injury settlement from you instead. No, they're not going to do that. Instead, what they're going to say is, hey, thanks for the $2 million. Now let's talk about the injury settlement, which is going to be basically at least $2.1 million, because there's another part of the protection for Marshon Lattimore that includes injury protection that the Washington Commanders are obviously aware of. So it's going to factor into this. So you have the $2 million roster bonus, and you have a $2.1 million injury protection from the CBA that impacts these things. And if the Washington Commanders wanted to try to clear the entire $18.5 million, there is actually a route to do that, minus the $2 million bonus, because you'd have to pay that either way. That would be a little bit trickier and a whole lot riskier. So while there is a path for the Washington Commanders to do it, I don't recommend, and nor do I believe they're going to take it. But because we want to be thorough, we will talk about that next here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by FanDuel. If you've ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. You use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you're going to automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. You get flights, tickets, the whole experience on FanDuel. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title. It adds the extra layer of excitement to every single game down the stretch. And now not only can your pick cash in, but it can also send you to the NBA Finals. So you got plenty of futures to pick from, teams that are going to win the finals, be in the finals, win their conference championships, et cetera, et cetera. All kinds of futures that you can pick from. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy flavor draft. The board is set. The options are locked. And with 18 different varieties, including wild new drops like Confetti Craze and Fruity Rainbow, there is a boost for everyone. Right now, I'm locked in on my number one overall pick. And with the number one pick in the 5 Hour Energy draft, I'm taking pomegranate. It's deep, slightly tart, honestly, kind of has a little bit of a sophisticated taste to it. You get this rich, darker fruit profile with a perfectly balanced sweetness and a clean, dry finish. Doesn't taste like a heavy candy, isn't as sharp. It's a sharp, complex fruit blend that gets me instantly dialed in. I don't like feeling like I just drank, like a piece of candy. I don't know if that makes sense. The sleeper pick and that I've got right now also is cotton candy. So it's kind of the opposite of that, right? We go from not really liking that, but if you're into that vibe or if you're in that mood, it's a pure kind of nostalgic throwback flavor. Like everything that has multiple flavors has a cotton candy flavor to it. So it's time to build your own roster. Find your new favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots available online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. To the everydayers, those of you who come through for every single episode, thank you again for coming through for this bonus, shorter formatted episode. Talking about the Marshon Lattimore contract situation, where the Washington Commanders can clear up a whole lot of cap space on their 2026 salary cap, but not necessarily be able to clear the full $18.5 million, because the only way the Washington Commanders could release Marshon Lattimore with no dead cap and no injury settlement, I should say, is for him to pass a physical. In order for him to pass a physical, he's got to recover from his ACL. That's not going to happen, and the physical would take place August 1st. So by the time August 1st comes, obviously March 15th is going to come and go. The $2 million bonus would have to be paid off to Marshon Lattimore. That $2 million bonus comes out of the salary cap. So regardless, as of March 15th, the Washington Commanders are going to have to account for $2 million in salary cap space for Marshon Lattimore. The injury protection, which there's a whole lot of details to that. It's basically called Section 4. A lot of people are talking about that as well. It is in place. It is worth up to $2.1 million for Marshon Lattimore specifically. It would be worth $2.1 million. So you have those two figures there: $2 million roster bonus March 15th, $2.1 million per injury protection, which only a portion of that would actually count against the salary cap if that's what Marshon Lattimore and the team negotiated, which would be $1.26 million. Instead of the $2.1 million. So there's a little bit of a cash savings potential there. But again, $2.1 million is essentially the floor to any injury settlement. Marshon also understands there's a $2 million bonus there. So in a sense, the agent can come to the team and say, listen, we can drag this thing out past March 15th. You're going to pay the $2 million roster bonus. Then you're going to give me a $2.1 million injury settlement or injury protection, which is going to cost you $1.26 million, was essentially $3.2 million. Let's meet a little bit right there. $3 million injury settlement to Marshon Lattimore. The Washington Commanders then release him with that injury settlement, and $3 million stays on the books. It would be called a settlement hit, not a dead cap hit, but you and I would basically look at it as dead cap for conversation purposes. And so instead of $18.5 million, the Washington Commanders would save $15.5 million against 2026 salary cap for releasing Marshon Lattimore with that $3 million injury settlement. There are some other kind of characteristics here of you can't waive Marshon Lattimore and then hope he gets picked up. One, no team is going to pick up a cornerback who's about to be 30, coming off an ACL with an $18.5 million salary cap hit. Just not going to happen. You know that. I know that. So waiving him wouldn't work anyway, but you also can't waive players in the offseason who have more than 4 years or have 4 years or more of vested service. They're called vested veterans. Marshon Lattimore clearly has 4 years or more playing time in the NFL, so you can't waive him anyway. So the only options for the Washington Commanders, injury settlement, which is what I believe is going to happen, what Mitch was talking about is going to happen. I believe that's going to be in the ballpark of $3 million. I believe that's going to come on or before March 15th. And then Marshon will be released, and the Commanders will save $15.5 million against the salary cap once that move is made. That's option number one. Option number two is wait till August 1st, and you hope that Marshon Lattimore clears his physical. You're going to pay him $2 million anyway. Then you release him, and you end up saving $16.5 million in salary cap, but you can't do that till August, so that money stays on the books. Even if you tell the NFL, we intend to do this, still stays on the books. And all those. And then the other option is basically to get somebody to trade for his contract, and it's just not going to happen. So it's really not even an option. It's a technicality, but it's not an option because it's not going to happen. So that's kind of the update on Marshon Lattimore. It's the latest. So one of the recent episodes here, we talked about, the potential of Marshon Lattimore playing, or being, or basically the Commanders unveiling the information like they do with Jonathan Allen, like at the scouting combine last year is when they let us know, hey, we're letting Jonathan Allen seek a trade, which, is essentially confirmation that we're moving on from him. That potentially still could happen with Marshon Lattimore, but again, that move to actually release him is going to likely pen a injury settlement, like Mitch Tischler, Monumental Sports, noted on X on Friday. And there's some information on just kind of how that works. So hopefully a little bit of educational, a little bit informational. And if you're kind of wondering, why isn't this done yet? Well, because they're probably kind of going back and forth. Like the agent, if he's a good agent, he's like, hey, look, $2 million roster bonus, $2.1 million injury protection. Sounds like $4.1 million to me. Let's get $4.1 million. And then Adam Peters like, hey, be reasonable. Let's come out and da-da-da. And eventually, I think Marshon's going to get $3 million. The benefit to him, he gets $3 million. He recovers. Once he's recovered, once he can pass a physical, he's free to sign with any team he wants and potentially make some of that money back on the back end there. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Commanders. Next time, coming up, we will continue talking about some things going on around this team, including how Durante Jones may be on the tip of the spear in one of the predominant trends unveiling itself in the NFL here in the last couple of years on defense. So make sure you're subscribed and followed along with Locked On Commanders so you get that and all the latest episodes coming up. And if you never miss one, the Everyday Club is built for you. LockedOnCommanders.supercast.com to check that out today. Make sure the Locked On NFL podcast is your next listen or view of the day. And to the Everydayers, I see you. I appreciate you every single day. And I thank you again for coming through for another episode today. To everybody out there, until next time, please stay safe, be kind to one another. We will talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.